A while back, my friend invited me to his wedding. I stayed over in a hotel and experienced something paranormal that I will never forget. I was staying in a hotel, only a few minutes away from the station. It wasn't anything special, just a business hotel, tucked away from the center of the city. It was pretty old. It didn't have the modern card key lock, but an older cylinder lock. I remember boarding the lift, and it making a load of noise as it creaked to the 7th floor slowly. My floor. Building was pretty old, and the decor was pretty dated too, but I thought, who cares? At least it's cheap. When I got to the room, it was in much better condition than I had thought. The room had a kind of weird smell to it though. To be frank, it stank of bleach and some kind of disinfectant. Fuck it, I thought. It's cheap. I just opened a window. I wanted to get married next year, so I was looking to save some money here and there. So I put my luggage down and I lie on the bed. I heard some sort of rattling noise next door, and my immediate thoughts were, man, these walls are thin. When I arrived, I called my girlfriend. Unfortunately, she couldn't make the wedding, so she was house-sitting our pets. I'm here. Oh, how's the hotel? Ah, well, you know. At least it's cheap. Seemingly my response had upset her, as she went silent. It was really out of character for her, so I let about 20 awkward seconds pass before I asked, what's wrong? Who's in the room with you? There's no one here, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about, I said, making my innocence seem all the more questionable. Well, I just heard a woman's voice, so... Hey, stop that. Don't try and freak me out. The walls are so thin here. Maybe you heard someone next door, I don't know. Oh yeah. You go back to your hometown, to a friend's wedding, the one weekend I can't make it, and stay in a hotel. You sure you aren't meeting up with an old flame or something? Yeah, sure. Why would I meet with a woman in a hotel, then call you? That would be stupid, right? Yeah, well, I guess. What followed was some stilted and awkward small talk that I won't bore you with. We said our goodnights, and we hung up. Abruptly after the call ended, I felt somehow lonely. I mean, I didn't know for what reason there was for her to doubt me. I thought about it a while longer, and there seemed to be something else beyond my feelings towards her annoyance at me. That lonely feeling again. The world just seemed cold and beyond my grasp. It felt like I was being crushed, like I didn't really belong anymore. It made my stay in the hotel very difficult. I couldn't seem to fall asleep. I'm the kind of guy who, as soon as my head hits the pillow, I'm out for the count. Not this time though. I just couldn't get comfortable. I just felt cold in different areas. Now it gets weird. I looked at my phone and I noticed that I had an app running. I mean, that's not that uncommon, right? If you think about your own phone right now, I bet you have more than just the one app running. What's weird was the fact that it was the voice recording app. I use this app a lot for work. I need to take minutes from meetings, etc. It seemed to have been running during my girlfriend and I's conversation. It caught the whole thing. I don't know how it did it, but since I had the recording, I thought I would just listen to it back. Then I heard something. When she asked, who's in the room with you? I definitely heard something, although it was faint at first. I turned the volume to the max. Let's die together. Let's die together. Let's die together. It was some whisper that just kept repeating. My spine was ice cold. I immediately tried to delete the voice note, but it just kept playing. Let's die together, kept repeating, until I held down the voice note and deleted it. Let's die together was then clearly audible in the hotel room. I just bolted for the front desk. I told them that I was leaving, and I scrabbled around town until I found another hotel. I went to a shrine the next day and prayed for that lost soul's peace before the wedding. Thankfully, nothing further happened. But I'll tell you this, that's the last time I stay in a low-budget downtown hotel to save money. This happened when I was a teenager, and I was living alone for the first time. About 3 or 4 months passed, and things were going well, but one night, things changed. I got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and I heard something. The knocking sound came from the front door. I had a video doorbell with an intercom. Why didn't you use that? I wondered. It didn't even register that it might be weird that someone was knocking at the door so late. I guess I was a night owl back then. Still am, to be honest. Anyway, without danger in my mind, I casually bobbed over to the door and put my eye to the peephole. I looked, but there was no one out there. I didn't care. I just went back to bed. I forgot about this incident for a while because I started a new job, working nights. Then one night, I had just got back home from work. I took my shoes off by the front door, and I heard a knock at the door. I quickly put my eye to the peephole, and there was no one there. I opened the door, no one there. I thought that it was a little creepy at this point, but I thought it could have been because I might have been making some sort of noise when I was returning home at night, and a neighbor was knocking back on the door in some sort of retaliation or protest. I don't know. This weird knock at the door continued nightly. It made me feel pretty uncomfortable at night, so I called the building manager, and he said he would look into it. He said that he thought it could be kids playing a prank or something. I didn't really believe that, since the knocking came so late at night. But he was decent about the situation, and he even put up posters on the building to ward off cold callers. But the knocks at the door didn't stop. I got used to it in the end. I noted that the knocks seemed to occur at around 3:30 to 4 a.m. each night. It annoyed me that it was still an unsolved mystery though. So one night I decided to wait by the front door from 3:10 in the morning. I must have been watching the intercom's live feed for almost half an hour. I was so determined to find out who was doing this. I heard the knock at the door, and there was definitely no one there. The reason why I couldn't see anyone on the intercom's video was because the knocking sound came from behind me this time, the balcony door. At that time I thought it could have been a neighbor or a prank, but now it went up another level. It made my blood turn to ice. I didn't want to move. I couldn't afford to live anywhere else, so I just had to put up with it. Whenever I would wait by the front door, I would hear a knock on the balcony door. It seemed like the prank, or whatever it was, wouldn't go beyond a knock, so I didn't really care all that much. After a couple of years, an incident happened where a car plowed through my balcony. I lived on the ground floor, and my apartment was in line with the car park outside. I guess that some careless driver had forgotten to put on the handbrake, or accidentally pulled forward into my apartment. I was livid, but I didn't have to deal with much of the admin because by the time I came back from work, the police and the landlord had already dealt with it. They had patched it up with plywood as best they could and told me that repairs would be ongoing from the next day. After all that, I needed a drink, so as I was sat in my chair staring at the mess of my apartment, sipping a cold beer, I laughed out loud and asked absent-mindedly, "Is everything gonna be okay?" Then, I heard a tap against the plywood. 2 knocks. But it wasn't the usual time for this kind of thing. I smiled. It was the first time that I thought it could be something otherworldly, making the knocking sound. Since that day, I had loved hearing the knocks. It was a real sense of comfort. I don't want to go into detail, but you might be able to guess that when a teenager moves out, it's not usually for a good reason. I didn't have much of a support network around me, so coming home and saying stuff like, "I'm home," then hearing a little knock or a tap as if in response was really heartwarming. I'm indebted to whatever spirit chose to keep me company. We had 5 happy years together. I always felt safe. The day I moved out, I stood there in my empty apartment and asked aloud, "Hey, is it okay to leave now?" I heard 2 knocks come back, only slower than usual. I'm not ashamed to say, I had tears in my eyes that day. This happened in springtime about 15 years ago. My hobby is mountain climbing, going from one mountain to the other. I made a plan to hike for 2 days and 1 night. Here's the route. The red line was my hike. I decided to take 4 days off work as holiday. Just in case. Here's also the Google Maps location, just in case any of you get curious. I don't recommend it though. I planned to stay in a tent overnight, Unfortunately, I left a little later than I had hoped, at 8 a.m. And by the time I had finished climbing the first day, I made a campsite around 2 p.m. and relaxed. It was great, but a little cold. So I decided to make some dinner, and I climbed into my sleeping bag. I must have dozed off because I woke up and it was dark out. I heard the sound of some shuffling around my tent. Something hit my tent several times. "Sorry," I heard a male voice murmur. That was all I heard. The voice seemed to fade into the light winds on the mountain. Another hiker, I guessed. A quick glance at the watch told me it was just after 8 p.m. The air in the tent was now cold. I thought that the hiker had come to take my leftovers from dinner. There are such people out there who don't provision enough, and in the olden days, people used to go up the mountain with nothing in the hope of finding food from other hikers. I guess that I'm of that mindset. I think the hiking community is pretty okay with things like this. We accept that it comes with the territory. But I was a little concerned about how much food would be left over, so I poked my head out of the tent. Outside the tent was really dark, but not pitch black. I couldn't see anyone out there, and I couldn't hear anyone either. I thought that I might see someone out there. I thought that I might have heard them pitching a tent nearby perhaps too. But even with the aid of the moonlight, I couldn't see anyone. Then I realized that I didn't see a flashlight when I heard someone bump into my tent. Surely there wouldn't be a person out here with a flashlight. At this point, because the voice I heard was so quiet, I thought that it might have been a little auditory hallucination. Maybe I heard some distant animal bark or something. Then, in that lovely place between consciousness and sleep, I heard something rub against my tent and slightly tap it, just like before. It went on for 30 seconds, and then I heard a voice mutter, "Sorry." Going by the voice, the man sounded to be in his 20s, I guessed. So I replied, "It's okay, don't worry." I slowly unzipped the tent and peeked out. No one there again. "Where did you go just now? I just came out to talk to you," I thought. I got a little freaked out at this point, because it was dawning on me that I was in the middle of nowhere, alone and in the dark. I started to think about all the scary stories I had heard about spirits and strange people on the mountains. The truth is, I was panicking a little. The idea of falling back asleep was long gone now. I weighed up my options, and I thought about packing my stuff up and running. But in the dark, I wouldn't know what direction to go. I might slip and break a leg. Getting lost on the mountains as well didn't seem like the best idea. So I guessed that the only logical thing I could do was wait until sunrise. I was shaking with fear, and I buried my face into the pillow to stop from making sounds. I kept rolling around as well, to stop myself from trembling. Then I heard the tent fabric being depressed from the outside, those familiar taps on the tent, followed by the man's voice. "Sorry." Moments of silence followed. Then the tent rustled again, and the man said sorry once more. This was horrible. I hated it. I told myself just to shut off my brain. I wrapped a towel round my head. At this point, I could only hear my blood pumping in my ears. I listened to my heart rate slow, and I guess I just drifted off. Either that, or I fainted from fear. I wake up and the towel is no longer covering my ears. I look at my watch, and it was just after 3 a.m. My plan was to leave this location at 5 a.m., but since I was awake, I thought that this was as good a time as any to leave. Then, as I was pulling myself out of the sleeping bag, I heard something hit and shake the tent like crazy. "I'm sorry." It scared the hell out of me. It was disturbing that it felt angrier now, yet the apology sounded weak and muttered still. The tent was continuously being battered now. The metal housing of the tent poles, began to buckle. I had no escape. I can't stay in the tent, and I can't leave the tent. What the hell do I do? I asked myself in a panic. So I just shouted, "Stop!" The banging stopped moments later. This time, I didn't hear a man's voice, so for some reason, that told me that the coast was clear, and I left my smashed-in tent. I started to pack up my things as quickly as I could. There was no damage to any of the things I left outside. Everything was just as I left it. I just grabbed some essentials and I bolt. I go in the direction of the hike I had planned, and I actually climbed that mountain that day. I think I was just determined not to let the experience put me off of what I came here to do. Feeling a lot better about myself, I returned to the campsite much later, just before sundown. I take down my battered tent, not wanting to litter, and as I'm pulling out the tent poles, I hear a voice mutter close to my ear. "I'm sorry." I spun around to find no one there. Later, when I did some research on the mountain, a man not too long ago died there. According to the reports, he died in distress. What a terribly lonely word that is. He died alone, lost in the mountains. Did he find my tent in search of help or perhaps companionship? I couldn't help wonder if it was him who was shaking my tent. Nowadays, when I go hiking or camping, I like to bring salt with me, or something to leave as an offering. This happened to me when I worked in a supermarket a few years back. We had this little suggestion box called The Customer's Voice at the front of the store. One of my jobs was getting the forms from the suggestion box and typing them up on the computer. It was a real thankless task. Most of the suggestions weren't suggestions at all, but complaints that one of the cashiers didn't smile or something spurious like that. Other times the complaint would be that their desired product had been sold out. This wasn't what I was employed to do. It was just a little extra thing that my genius boss had me do at the end of the shift, so inevitably, I was usually left alone in the dark office after all the other employees had gone home. It was tedious and boring. Sometimes someone had filled in the form in a different way. The handwriting was totally illegible. It was all shaky and it just looked like a load of scribble, to be honest. It was pretty weird, but they only appeared every other week. I mentioned it to some colleagues and they said that I should just bin them and ignore it. The handwriting was always the same. I guessed that some oddball was just trying to mess with us. I agreed that it was just a prank and I kept my eye on the suggestion box as often as I could, but I didn't see anything strange. Then one day, I was working in the morning and I had remembered that I had forgotten to lock the customer suggestion box. It was something that the manager insisted upon. Like anyone wants to steal questionnaires, seriously. I wanted to lock it before he noticed anyway. So I went over to it with the key and I saw that there was a suggestion form in the box. It was impossible, since I had collected and collated all the suggestions last night. From the time I left work the night before until the morning, there would be no reason for someone to put a suggestion in that box. The store was locked and my boss didn't seem like a fun enough guy to want to pull a prank. In that moment, as I stared at it, I thought that someone was in the store with me. I swear I heard a sigh come from one of the aisles. I picked out the suggestion and turned it over. I felt an intense feeling that someone was staring at me. The suggestion was one of those weird scribble writing ones. Who would be writing one of these in the dead of night when there's no one in the store? My spine went ice cold. A couple of days after this, some other weird stuff went down. The security alarm went off in our store, after hours. This happened a couple of times during the same week. One night, the boss sent the security guard down there to take a look. He said that he saw a black shadow moving through the aisles. He said he searched the store, but he couldn't find anyone in there. As soon as we employees heard this, some started to say that they had seen the black shadow themselves and heard mysterious whispers. It made work life pretty spooky. Some employees didn't even want to come back to work, and I'm pretty sure some of the staff decided to take holiday around this time, and some also phoned in sick. This really irked my manager. He wanted to end all the superstition, as we even had customers asking about the supposed ghost in our store. I also mentioned to him about the weird scribble writing, and he said he would be getting in a priest. I laughed, but he was serious. I've never seen anything more surreal than a priest in full regalia pacing up and down our store's aisles, chanting Buddhist sutras. It seemed to solve the situation, and there were no more scary goings-on in the store. The rumors about the place died down, and eventually the staff stopped mentioning it. But it makes me wonder, still to this day, what was that scribble writing in the suggestion box trying to tell us? It was really weird. And up until I moved away, I didn't really like walking past that supermarket.